Hi, I'm Casey Luaters, and this is Could Be Pretty Cool. Short films have a shelf life problem. Most film festivals give them about a year before they're considered old news, and after that, even great work can just disappear. In Atlanta, two filmmakers decided that was a problem worth fixing. Welcome to Could Be Pretty Cool. Today, we're talking with Rocco Shapiro and Akshay Bhatia, the co founders of Real Friends, a production company and community platform built around Atlanta's independent film scene. How they met and what they're building is a conversation we think is worth hearing. Let's get into it. So I am, just to jump into it, I am really excited to have these guests on the podcast because I discovered their work in my favorite way, just organically scrolling on my phone. And the old algorithm was like, you should probably know what these folks are up to. And it was correct. And so we have Rocco and Akshay on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. And I would love if you could introduce yourselves and let the folks know a little bit more about your backgrounds.
All right. My name's Akshay Bhatia. I'm writer, director, producer based here in Atlanta, Georgia. And I come from a little bit of the union world, working on a couple different productions. Spent about 3 years working on Megalopolis, which kind of defined a lot of my early work in the industry and a lot of this stuff that I learned first and foremost as a crew member, but also as a larger producer and kind of pursuing that line of work that I was interested in, which led to, in an abstract way, kind of me and Rocco meeting. We actually have a funny story because we met before I got on that production, but we became friends a little bit down the line when we started working together on a short film of mine called The Preakness, which at the time, him and I had gotten really drunk. We were hanging out with a bunch of friends, and then we threw up the film. We didn't throw up.
Played the film.
We threw the film on a screen.
At the theater, yeah.
After hours, we put the film up on the screen, and we were watching through, and Rocco, because he's one of the most truly creative and like gracious people I know, and is always like trying to figure out what everyone artistically is about. He came to me, he's, I've got some ideas. Would you be willing to and open to hearing it? And I truthfully am always and really excited about that level of creativity and collaboration in that. So we started working together on the short just in a small note session. And then we just started hanging out every day, recutting my short and coming up with new ideas. And that started like the early stages of his and my partnership as producing partners, first with that short film, but then in the early days of him forming Real Friends and getting that off the ground and us working on a couple different features, that both his directorial debut and mine, that led to eventually my involvement in a larger way with Real Friends, which Real Friends overall, I'd say that Rocco can speak more to.
Yeah, and I'm Rocco Shapiro, and I come from a commercial kind of mindset background as a filmmaker, as a writer, director, producer, and editor. And then, yeah, my involvement working on Akshay's film, and even in my involvement in being part of the theater, was always a relationship that I had, putting on screenings and throwing like fun events to get people out of their house and into the theater. And that was something I had started a couple of years ago. And then it wasn't until January of last year that I started Real Friends as like a brand to be able to, one, produce the films that Akshay and I were working on and the feature films that we were producing, but also as a home for the events and a larger space for communities to meet and for us to meet other filmmakers, just as I met Akshay by hanging out at the theater. It becomes like a cultural hub. So we wanted to meet other filmmakers and other artists and other laborers and folks who work in the industry and people who actually make the movies. But yeah, I mean, that all came from me being a filmmaker. And that's first and foremost, I'm a filmmaker. Second, I'm an exhibitor, and I enjoy both aspects of it. And they both inform each other. And yeah, that's where we are today, being able to make films like we're working on right now, to hosting films and celebrating artists around Georgia.
You know, community is not only central to the way that Real Friends has grown and grew out of our own love and embracing of the community, but it's also really central and core to how we met as well. We met through a bunch of different local events, whether it was small screening events or going to the plaza, going to the Tara theaters. And we owe both our creative and partnership and friendship to the community. And in the same way, we want to extend that level of graciousness and of excitement and creative spirit to everyone who comes to our events.
So always fascinated by how collaborators, sort of the collaboration origin story. So thank you for sharing that. And because the two of you are both still practitioners, you're both still actively making films, I would love to know more about how you balance your personal craft with now running Real Friends. How does that sort of work out for you in your day to day?
It's tough.
I wish this was more of a therapy session because maybe we can get it out. We can find it. We can all together, the three of us, come up with an answer. But truthfully, I think they inform each other. I'm a better filmmaker because we're going out and watching other movies. We're seeing other people who's in town. We're forcing ourselves to be out there. It also allows us to get more opportunities to meet people and bring on sponsorship or partnership, and really able to try to find financing or find people that work on our projects and work on projects. And then we want to be better filmmakers ourselves and come and go out and make stuff so we can keep showing people that, hey, we're not just putting on events, we have our own stuff and have an audience that kind of follows us in a way that, like, yeah, we love the events that they put on. What can they do? And they're a part of it too. Our films get better because we're in the community. We're seeing everything that's happening. We're a part of everybody, and everybody's coming together. And we also want to elevate ourselves to be a part of the community as filmmakers as well. And I definitely wouldn't want to be like the person that puts on events and festivals and then our movies are terrible. Like, that just would make me feel bad. I'd be like, oh, the guys who submitted to the festivals, they rejected my movie, but look at the crap that they did. I definitely want to be better too, and I think that helps.
Yeah, and I think you're speaking to the kind of creative and more inspiration side of things, but there's also the practical quality of it. And I think in any community, there is that communal aspect, which is to say that everyone is working on stuff. Everyone has needs. Everyone says, I need a really great DP. I can go to maybe Akshay and Rocco, and maybe they can recommend a cinematographer, and vice versa, that we have people coming out to our events who are also really talented filmmakers, producers, directors, who all have their own teams. And that's the idea, is that coming out of film school, you can be a little bit of an island of maybe the 5 or 6 people that you work with every single time, but you're scarcely ever finding people that are new and bring new voices to it. Because the reality is, every single collaborator you bring onto something brings something new and brings something unique, whether artistically or even in a practical sense of resources that they have. And that's the other thing, is that it's so hard nowadays to be able to find resources to make a quality film on a low budget. And the more that you invest in community and the more that people are unified around the idea and that shared love of making films, the more that, say, a really great filmmaker who comes to our event says, I love making movies, I love doing all this, but I can't get access to a camera, and I can't get access to a really great editor or colorist or sound designer. And maybe we can be the connect that they need, or they can be the connect that we need for something, because like we said, we're always working on stuff. And that's the one great value of also having Real Friends, is that it actively does further our creative endeavors and vice versa. The more excited we are about our creative endeavors as filmmakers, the more excited we are equally about the events. And it's the dream, in a way, where you get to be able to actually populate your full-time work around the industry that you love and the dream that you have.
Yeah, it makes the most sense because film is the only art form that you can't do well on your own, that you need to be connected with other people. You need to work with other people. And when you're sharing a space and sharing community with like-minded people, and you try to spread out our names and our events to get us into places and other people into places, to let them know that there's an ability to find the right sound person or the right equipment that they need, or there's a location and you come and watch a movie and you're like, oh my God, that's literally the type of location I need. I need to talk to that director and find out how they got it. Oh, it's their brother's restaurant. Cool. Let's all be friends. There's just that you just need to be connected. It does take, as cliched as it is, it does take a village to make a movie. And we definitely want to be and help foster that community in that town.
You all are making my job easy. That could be pretty cool. We're all about the village and the community and the rising tide raises all the ships mentality, because yes, especially these days in so many different creative industries, doing it by yourself is, if not impossible, like you're gonna lose your mind trying to do it by yourself. And so I actually had a question based on something that you said, Akshay, about you come out of film school and like you have your film school crew, but like how do you continue to advance and grow? And so, another thing that we've explored on many episodes of the podcast is the sort of art school to real life pipeline. And in particular, for you all, as someone who now has started your own production company, I would love for you to share some of the things that you've learned about what this real world creative entrepreneurship life is like that maybe was not so apparent in your earlier days.
Absolutely. I'll say one thing that's really great right at the jump of what we get out of doing events alongside productions for me is something that I rubbed up against in art school a lot, or in film school specifically. I think there was this general attitude among so many people, and it's always the struggle when you're going into an institution that saddles you with an enormous amount of debt and no concrete job prospects, is that there's the worry ultimately when you're in classes about theory or classes about watching films or engaging with films. You hear this constant adage amongst your fellow students, which is why would I engage? Why am I putting myself in thousands of dollars of debt when I can watch movies at home? And it always felt like for me that was really a frustrating thing to hear, because I'm like, none of us are watching some of these movies at home. The great thing about being in film school is the ability to curate your taste as well as cultivate your prowess as a filmmaker and as an actionable sort of professional. And that is what's really part and parcel to being a great filmmaker, I think, is being able to have an earnest and exacting kind of love of film. And for me, it was the kind of thing where you wouldn't go to an English major and say, oh, you can go to the library and read Shakespeare. Why are you getting a degree in that? Because the whole point is that you get to be in a space where you are able to love cinema and that be the thing that propels you forward. And I think I've heard that same sentiment echoed amongst a lot of other filmmakers where they're like, I took for granted how much time I got to be able to just engage with cinema at art school because I was so focused on having to figure out what the next steps were for me. And for me, it's really great that being able to give people an outlet where they get to not only engage with new films, old films that they love, but also in a community that's also doing the same thing and trying to build their sort of creative journey.
Your own sort of creative economy of building your own business and forming relationships and networking can oftentimes, when you're really at your earliest days, you can forget how important it is to also be tied to an actual passion that is at the core of everything. And for a lot of the creatives I've known who went straight from film school where it was feeding into them, like, you have to do this and form a really great CV and a really great resume and a great reel and things that are so actionable, but not quite, I would say, passion driven, to be able to give people access to being able to be part of community that is very passion driven alongside and in step with their creative pursuits, for me, really gets at the core of the idea of work-life balance in a way, because there's the work and then life is tied to your love of cinema and your love of creativity and your love of the films that made you want to do it in the first place. So the idea that we can give people that access that I think sometimes maybe is lacking in film schools, both in the student base and in the sort of education base, is really rewarding for me. But that's the first thing that comes to mind, I would say.
I can speak from myself as coming from similar to Akshay, where I was pretty, even going to an art school, I was very focused in on learning for myself and not necessarily putting myself out there and going to any events and going to stuff. And I was like, you know what? I think I realized that, of course, because you can't do it on your own, you have to try to find spaces that make you feel comfortable and make you feel able to push yourself out of that comfort zone. And there's always like a thing where it's like, you're not going to go all the way into the deep end right away, but you start to take slow steps. You go to different events by yourself, theaters by yourself. Then you start to meet people at those spaces the next time. And I wanted to try to start to create the thing that I would have liked experiencing or going to when I started making films, which was like a consistent kind of opportunity that was no pressure, that you could engage with the way you wanted to. You weren't forced to talk with anybody or meet anybody new. You'd only go to it. And if you enjoyed the film, if you enjoyed the film, you could engage with the filmmaker. If you didn't, you don't have to. You're not forced to meet new people. You're not forced to meet the person. You can look and find the avenue and the angle that you really enjoyed about it. Just as when you go to a theater and you really like the movie, you could talk to the people after about it that you enjoyed. Or when you go to a festival, you can meet just the specific people that you want to, and try to find out what your needs are. And yeah, for me, that was my way into it. But yeah, but to Akshay's point, the thing that like I got like dreamy eyed about is that like this space of a theater and how it occupies people's time, and you can just go in, and not necessarily even about the strangers that you meet that you are experiencing it, but just the intention behind it. You have to go out of your house to do it. You can't pause it. You have to enjoy it and engage with it. And there aren't very many things in life where you don't have any distraction. You're not doing multiple things at once. But when you're going to watch a movie in a theater, that is the only thing you're doing for that amount of time. And further, unless you're going to a festival, you're not doing that for a short film at all. And you can really see a lot of seeds of ideas in your favorite filmmakers by watching their shorts. And I think that's really nice to be able to try to find out what those are in yourself as a filmmaker and in other filmmakers around you, so that you know who and what to look for when you want to work with a filmmaker. But just being able to, I think like I'm very proud of being able to like continue to help host spaces to watch films without distractions. And then that to be your distraction from the rest of the world. But the fact that you can go into a movie, and even if it's a movie or a short you've seen many times, and experience it in the way that, this medium is intended to, is really important. And just like meditation, you can focus on one thing and learn a lot more about it afterwards.
So it's always a pleasure interviewing storytellers because you naturally progress the narrative of the interview in just a lovely way. So that brings us to a wonderful point in the conversation where you can tell us more about Real Friends' signature event. Tell us more about Real Talk.
Yeah, Real Talk came from me having experiences going to festivals and going to events, and obviously like enjoying having films that have played in them, and going to Sundance and seeing shorts, and going to festivals online and watching blocks, and wanting to do one part events to play movies that I've made, been a part of, that don't have a long lifetime online or in festivals. It's only that one year. You can bring things back, and I wanted to play some films that I had created. And then also my kind of the things that I didn't really love about festivals. I didn't love that you watched short films for 2 hours that are all very different tones, comedies, dramas, everything. Like I like that they're all together like that, and they're all, whether in conversation with each other or just completely different. But then to do 2 hours and be in a wave of emotions, and then see 10 filmmakers and be like, all right, wait, which one was the director of that movie? Wait, what movie did that person direct? And be like, I want to make that easier. Make it shorter, make the amount of films shorter, so it's 45 minutes, and then have a Q&A that's the length of the movie, where the directors come up, and you're not going to forget the director's face when they're talking about their movie in front of it playing. And just like being at home watching the DVD commentaries, where I got the majority of my education from filmmakers, hearing the directors and writers answer the questions that they would never be asked at a festival, because they wouldn't know. As you could be an amazing host or an amazing,
every question is, where did this come from?
Yeah, and it's like,
where did this story start?
And it's and those things are important, and they'll naturally come out anyway. But also, like, the director of the project's going to know the important thing that happened off camera that they're never going to be asked, and that's never going to be thought of, because the logistics of a day are so long for a moment that is, just a few photographs, really, just a few seconds in a movie. And I wanted to try to replicate that, one, so I can learn more about my favorite filmmakers in town, and learn more about their process, and learn more about what things went right and wrong, because it's entertaining. It's entertaining when things go wrong and you hear those stories, and they're really fun. But then also I figured it would be something that everyone else could learn from, and it would be an enjoyable time. And then for people to be able to give back after the event, after the screenings, to then have a mixer where then you can ask the questions, because the audience really doesn't get to ask questions during that part, which is, I think, one of the most important parts of a Q&A, is letting the audience take over. But we throw the filmmakers back out there, and everybody is able to mix and be on the same level, and not feel like there's any pressure to ask in front of everybody, or feel like that the filmmakers are on a different level than the people attending.
Yeah, just to give like a kind of summary of what Real Talk functions like for maybe the listeners who don't know. So the way that the Real Talk events work is that we usually curate about 5 short films and we play them in a row, but then instead of doing a Q&A with a host, moderator, what have you, we have the filmmakers come back up, we play it on mute, and they essentially do a live director's commentary, like a DVD commentary. And then what follows after is a mixer in that way. And echoing everything Rocco said, the idea, I think, gave a lot of flexibility to being able to, first of all, actually foreground a lot of filmmakers' voices. I think this is not me trying to rag on film festivals, but I think the issue does come up where filmmakers will come after a really brilliant film and be given questions that are so broad and general that I think you can walk away from a screening feeling unfavorable because you're like, I didn't really learn much, nor did I get much out of it. And I think that's also a stultifying thing for a lot of filmmakers, which is to say that when you go up and you're programmed against a film that's completely different from yours, you're getting the same question, which was, what was the worst day on set? What was how did you first start writing this? What was your favorite day on set? And the questions are so broad as to not really give you a lot of space to explore the specificities of your own project. And I think so. The series kind of started off with Rocco, as he said, wanting to elevate some films from filmmakers that we knew as friends and colleagues, both that were personal favorites of ours, but it grew from there when I saw and talked to Rocco and he felt the same way, where I was like, I think this has a lot more expansion from here, where I think we can elevate a lot of different voices. Because I think, and I think I'm going to be a lot more uncharitable towards film festivals than Rocco is in this interview, but I think the kind of ugly truth of film festivals right now with short films is that it's a really bad time to make a short film. It just is, because for one, a lot of the major festivals will reject shorts without larger either connections to the festival through legacy alums or without larger PR representation. And it sucks because publicists these days are also not representing shorts anymore because the market is so limited. And that's of how what was originally in the Oscars, for example, the category that would elevate new voices is now the best live action short that is going to celebrities who are making their first directorial debut or doing a vanity piece related to either their career or something adjacent to it. All that to be said, great films have won, but it's tragic to see that this form that is so filmmaker friendly has now become more industry facing in the most extreme of ways. And that's unfortunately the truth of short films in a larger sense after they're done, because you can make a feature as an independent filmmaker right now and you have multiple different avenues, whether it's streaming, whether it's different acquisitions to put it out, but it's harder to find distribution for a short film. It just is. It's either going to YouTube or Vimeo, and if you don't really have strong legs, it's just kind of it's going to disappear. And it can be really heartbreaking for a lot of filmmakers, I think, who put a lot of effort and time and work into making a great short that eventually its lifespan ends after a year. And that was a big thing with Real Friends and Real Talk as well, that when we started talking about how do we expand this out beyond just our friends' films, was we wanted to do away with the kind of premiere status and timeline status that kind of is core to a lot of film festivals, because at a certain point there's a lifespan on every film where after about a year and a half, most film festivals say you can't resubmit this film. You can't submit this film to our thing after 2 years or so. And it gets really heartbreaking then when you're like, maybe they didn't understand it then, maybe they'll understand it now, or maybe with this film festival premiere I'll be able to get here. It ends up being the thing where a lot of really great and really savvy and brilliant work is judged or deemed a failure simply because it just didn't play in a certain film festival at a certain time. And that's up to a million different factors, whether it's the curation staff, whether it's just when you submitted, all these other things. And so for us, we wanted to make sure that none of those things were barriers to entry. You can dust off a film that you made 5 years ago that you still think is really great and that you want to share with people. You can submit something to us that has premiered in every major festival in Georgia, and it won't really matter to us. It's more about sharing in the space and elevating the artist in that way. And on top of that, the scorekeeping and awards based stuff that is at film festivals that can denigrate really great works simply because they didn't win over another one, that doesn't exist in Real Talk. It simply is a space to elevate the artist and allow them to have the stage and the mic solely for themselves. And I think that's the interesting thing about Real Talk occasionally, is that you get to see so much and almost like an ugly way of exactly what the filmmaker is like, where some people are not even comfortable on stage and then they're just going up and doing jokes and messing around. Sometimes they're just throwing questions out to the audience. Some people are very comfortable on stage and they're basically running you through the entire every minute of making the film to the point that they don't even have enough time to talk about everything they want to talk about because their film is only a certain amount of time. And I think that's the great thing where it's like everyone who's ever walked away from a Real Talk event has really gotten to see the warts and all kind of personalities and artistry of every single director that goes up there.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're really trying to innovate the ecosystem for how short films are received by audiences, how the filmmakers are able to talk about them and to hopefully get more eyes on them and more attention, build audiences. So, my final question for the two of you, there's so much speculation within the future of the film industry. People are saying micro dramas for streaming platforms or for social media. That's the future. Of course, the AI discussion is this whole other episode. But I would love for you both to share with both what you're doing as artists, what you're doing as ecosystem builders. What is the future that you would like to see, either for the film industry in general, for the short film genre on its own? What if you could just paint the perfect picture of the next, I don't know, 3 to 5 years? What would it look like to you?
All those things can and will exist in their way. I think we'll see that like the micro kind of dramas or vertical dramas are a form of entertainment, but they're in the same form of entertainment as the people who watch vlogs, used to watch vlogs or watch YouTube reviews or YouTube like personalities or watch reality TV show or watch or spend time on TikTok. It's like they're not that stuff is always going to exist and it's a form of entertainment, sure. Same thing with AI. I think that people thought a lot more was going to happen with it, maybe in terms of performances and how it was going to take over the industry, when ultimately it's like many things, probably just going to be a tool to create more science fiction movies or more like fantasy epics or things that studios aren't going to spend money on for large productions because that whether they don't make money or not, or they're too big risks. I don't feel like they're going to be occupying the spaces that we're really in. Maybe I'm just naive about that. We want to see that filmmakers and financiers and everybody see that there is a viable way for artists to make films and experience films in theaters or at home who want something a little bit more elevated, want something to, and maybe not even more elevated, but want something intentional, something that they can pay attention to. And in my experience, and the thing that I like is to distract themselves from the rest of the world or find something more about themselves or be a little introspective and find something new about the world by experiencing art. And in short form or long form, short form obviously lets you be more experimental, lets you try things out. It lets you experience parts of the world or parts of yourself that you might not be able to afford to do in a longer form, whether financial or creative reasons. But having a space for that is the thing that I want to, it's not even that I want to see happen more. It's that I want more people to pay attention to and realize that there's actually, it's a viable part of the industry that people can make and finance projects for folks like us and folks like a lot of our friends to be able to work and make a living off of making art that people will see. Just as because all of these distributors and everything that we want to work for is going to put their hand in both the pots. They're going to make the verticals, they're going to make AI content, and they're going to make second screen experiences, but they're also going to make things that people want to pay attention to and want to experience. Because at the end of the day, like the awards drive people. Like the dream of wanting to be a filmmaker was the reason why everybody submits to our festival and why we did what we want to do is because we want to be a filmmaker. And some of these things are a means to an end. And I don't know how long some of these things are going to last, but
Yeah,
I can tell you that the experience of going to a theater is going to last a long time because it keeps inspiring people to go out and make something. And there will be a time in which people pay attention to it.
I think at the end of the day, the industry always is going to lean towards alarmism and all or nothing mentality at all times, where it's just to say where if $100 million or $1 billion blockbusters are flopping, they're like, then audiences don't want to watch movies. They got to go watch, their attention spans are fried and they only want to watch microdramas and AI content. And it's like, that's not the reality of every single person's life. And the extremes don't represent the enormity of what people engage with art for. And I think the thing that's more destructive oftentimes is people so thoroughly trying to dismantle or rebuild the system every single time that it ebbs and flows. Because the reality is just interests change, people's kind of mind goes in other ways. But the reality is that films and people's engagement with it still subsists and still continues. The reality is, in the golden age of Hollywood and its kind of collapse following Cleopatra, we got the 70s American new wave of really interesting, lower budgeted films that then built up to the 80s that gave us once again the blockbuster surge, and the 90s, which once again ebbed and flowed. And the reality is, in the industry and Hollywood and the landscape of film always has to answer to whatever is culturally going on at the time. And at the end of the day, that also has nothing to do with making films, in my mind. And that's the unfortunate thing I think that's happening. Peter Dinklage actually said this at the Sundance Film Festival last week, that I thought was really poignant and really helpful, where he said, they're like, what's your advice to younger filmmakers right now? He's like, stop saying how hard it is. Yeah, we know it's hard, but you're discouraging the people who can actually make the industry good, or can actually continue the viability of the industry, whether in independent film or in larger studio stuff. Because every generation, if you're treating it like AI is coming to take the jobs, which we found out is not the case whatsoever, you're seeing a massive sort of exodus of any kind of real talent, because you told them, well, you can't survive on this. But you're also then judging their entirety of their artistry around financial success or the means by which they are able to sustain their lives. And it's really depressing. It's really destructive, because for Rocco and I, we're actually right now in the middle of developing our two debut features, and both of which actually have, not to speak to because we're NDA'd and stuff, but they both have options for larger theatrical distribution, as well as budgets with talent that are more well known from other films and TV projects. And with us facing to that kind of part of the industry, it's only made me more reassured that this is going to stick around, because the reality is it's both bigger and not as big as people think that it is, because every single making one great film, making this or that, doesn't then create an entire infrastructure that implodes in one day. So say the next Marvel film flops, that's not going to crush an entire industry, nor is it going to crush an art form. And that's the thing that I think is really important at the end of the day to remember, is that if your film didn't play at Sundance or Cannes or Telluride, you're not a failure. You're a success because you made a film. And that's the thing. Your success is in making the art. And the financial success that kind of comes after that is, at the end of the day, just it's part and parcel to finding your way. At the end of the day, I said this to my mom one time as a joke, where I was just like, yeah, I know what my career is. I'm just looking for what my job is. In the ideal world is just a continued and invested interest in independent cinema that's then bolstered by studios that right now could use a lot of lower budgeted hits, and us continuing to be able to operate in a community minded sense to remind people that, yeah, watching films is fun and engaging with art is meaningful and sustenance for life. And whether that's naive or not, you can take it one way or another. But I think at the end of the day, the fact that we see record stores coming back and people really craving that level of community and analog interest after a decade of alarmism about MP3s and iPods and iTunes killing off any kind of sustainability of that industry, or even the fact now where NBC is once again restarting pilot season, because they're like, yeah, we tried the whole streaming thing and it crushed us, and we realized that the old way worked better all along. And
It's true.
and it's a thing where it's like big tech or larger billionaires will come in to try to dismantle the industry to try to make it better for themselves, only to find out that things worked a certain way. And at the end of the day, it's about being savvy and being an artist that can navigate that. But at the end of the day, just keep making art, really.
Yeah. And if you do build it, people will come. And whether that's creating a space or creating film at a certain budget level and showing that it is profitable is nice. That's how you find your job. That's how you find the thing you do. But I agree with Akshay. It's, once you making the film is the hardest part, and it's the most rewarding as well. And as long as people continue to be encouraged and find safe spaces, the art form will continue and the medium will continue and the theatrical experience will continue.
I have have to say, this has been a surprisingly calming interview. I feel like a lot of us, regardless of what,
Alarmist.
no
Yeah.
matter, what area of the creative space we're in, we're all sort of like, oh God, what's going to happen? But I think the two of you may have put a lot of people at ease. And I think that's a great
I hope
unexpected
so.
thing.
That makes me happy.
So how can people find out more about either Real Friends, Real Talk, your work, all the things? How do people find you?
Yeah, Real Talk is opens for submissions again in April on Film Freeway for filmmakers to submit their projects. But you can keep up with everything that we're working on for Real Friends, including our films at Real Friends Movies on Instagram and then realfriendsfilms.com. We have all of our projects listed there, and you can join our mailing list to keep directly updated with us and also contact us from there as well. Me personally, I am also very easily accessible. It's just my name, Rocco Shapiro, on all like social medias and online, and I'm very frequent on my emails as well.
And mine's more annoying. My Instagram is at, and I'm going to spell it out because it's a Kurt Vonnegut reference, and I've yet to change it because I'm honestly just too stubborn. But it's at BOKOMARU00 on Instagram. I have to spell it out because Edgar Wright actually messed up my username one time on a post, and it was actually pretty funny. But I'm also active on Instagram. Anyone can reach me. And we're always looking forward to talking with people.
We'll be sure to put your contact in the show notes and we'll get it right. We'll spell it right here. So thank you both so much for coming to chat with us. I think a lot of folks are going to hear this and be like, oh, not only is this an innovative way to connect with the community, but the community is still here and full of people who are passionate about it. So good to know.
Thank you, Casey.
Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
There are so many things that stood out to me about Rocco and Akshay's approach that I want to sit with for a second. First, they didn't wait for a grant or a perfect business plan or some industry gatekeeper to validate what they're doing. They just started showing up at theaters, at screenings, in each other's creative work, and built real friends out of what was already happening naturally. And that's a model worth paying attention to, regardless of what creative industry you're in. Community is infrastructure, not a bonus. Rocco made the point that film is the only art form you genuinely can't do well alone. You need other people for crew, equipment, locations, for creative energy. Real Friends is a resource sharing ecosystem disguised as a screening series. If you're building any kind of creative practice and you're not actively investing in your local scene, you're probably making it harder on yourself. Another thing that stuck out to me about this conversation was the notion of rejecting the expiration date. Akshay was candid about how the festival circuit has become increasingly inaccessible for short filmmakers without PR representation or legacy connections, and that even the best shorts often just vanish after their festival eligibility window closes. Real Friends deliberately ignores premiere status and submission timelines. A film you made 5 years ago is welcome. That's a direct challenge to a system that conflates newness with quality, and it's opening doors for work that deserved an audience the first time around. Finally, and something that I thought was the most surprising, the notion of not leading with the doom. Akshay referenced Peter Dinklage's advice at Sundance. Stop telling young filmmakers how hard it is. Both Rocco and Akshay push back on the all or nothing industry narrative. The idea that if blockbusters flop, cinema must be dying, or that AI and microdramas are going to replace everything. Their take is more grounded. Interest ebbs and flows. The industry has always restructured itself, and the people doing the panicking are usually not the ones doing the making. As Akshay put it, I know what my career is, I'm just looking for what my job is. For more on how to build community-driven creative infrastructure, and why the short film format might be the most strategically undervalued space in independent filmmaking right now, head over to our Substack at couldbeprettycool.substack.com. This has been Could Be Pretty Cool. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. Farewell, and may all of your creative endeavors flourish. Could Be Pretty Cool News is a Could Be Pretty Cool original production. Created, hosted, and executive produced by Casey Lueders. Senior producer is Liz Moore, and supervising sound editor is Trinity Jackson. Our original theme music was composed by Camille Stennis and cover art design by AJ Johnson. To learn more about Could Be Pretty Cool and discover whatever else we're up to, visit us at couldbeprettycool.substack.com. Thank you for listening.